but I think it's what's right. And here it is. Everyone must be aware of the multiple intersections they occupy and take steps to ensure they're not using their privileges to harm underprivileged groups. And that means no dunking, no suspicion over people for claiming a marginalized identity, and no using your identity to deflect responsibility for the shit that you do. Is that good? Okay? We got it? Cool? Alright. What was I talking about?
Okay, well, even if psychiatrists and psychiatric institutions are biased, that clinical expertise far surpasses the average assessment of the average Joe Schmo, or John Doe, right? Because the psychiatrist knows, right? They know the truth. They know how to be more objective than us, right? They know. Only they know. Just because something is a social construct doesn't mean that it isn't real. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have serious effects on lived experience, or that it doesn't have a material foundation. Money is a social construct. Yet money also impacts us on an internal psychological level. That hurt. People throw away their lives chasing big wins. And of course, money has an external material reality. It practically organizes the world. A $20,000 family and a $200,000 family live completely different lives, in zip codes with totally different communities, schools, doctors, and even food options. So money is real, but it's also something humans created. Now, I may not be a psychiatrist, but I am a mind reader, and I know what you're thinking. Money and mental conditions are totally different things, Alex. Money comes from the outside world, and mental conditions come from the internal brain. You can't socially construct things that come from the freaking brain. Just because a given set of experiences are internally emergent doesn't mean that the ways we categorize and understand those experiences can't be socially constructed. Because to understand internal experiences, we always have to put those experiences into words. We have to label those experiences and draw boundaries around certain experiences to differentiate them from other experiences. Social theorists Berger and Luckman argue that social construction doesn't mean that something isn't real or doesn't exist. Instead, social construction refers to the idea that things in the world, like a shoe, a ball, or the fraud you committed on your 2022 tax returns, aren't things totally independent of the ways we discuss and label these things. Reality as we know it and understand it is constructed through us talking about reality, labeling reality, and categorizing objects in reality. We don't have access to the world as it really is. Just look at the goddamn spectrum of light. Actually, you can't, you bonehead. You know how much of this we can actually see? This little gay piece right here. You can't even see the shit that's right in front of us. As humans, we've come to know reality through language and social exchange. Through people telling us that red is red and blue is blue. It's all we have. Reality itself is socially constructed. But this all seems so abstract. How can mental illness be a social construct? Isn't it a set of chemicals that does things and makes you listen to Elliott Smith? Well, let's look at the history of psychiatry and think about what people mean when they say mental illness is socially constructed. If I presented you all with the words reason and madness and asked you to describe the relationship between these two ideas, you might say that reason and madness are opposites. Madness and reason are inherently opposed, or are they? Have madness and reason always been contrasting concepts, understood as opposites throughout time? Or is that dichotomy actually a recent invention? Let's do a little Western culture throwback, but not like in a weird fascist way. In the Middle Ages, mental illness was not seen as a medical pathology, but as a madness that constituted a legitimate form of knowledge. What does that mean? Is it good or bad? Well, that requires a bit of light reading. Michel Foucault was a guy with ideas. Some of those ideas were sus and mid and cringe, while others went on to influence the entire disciplines of sociology, philosophy, literary theory, anthropology, feminism, critical theory, basically any field where homosexuals reign supreme. In his highly influential work, Madness and
Anywhere with a
Civilization,
homosexual.
Foucault argues that mental illness and disorder, which he calls madness,
I'm
is a
literally
historically
just gonna put a
changing
light
social
on top of
construct.
this.
He uses the word
because-
mad to describe what we today call mental illness, so when I use the term mad, I don't mean it as a bad word. Think of madness as a group of behaviors and
Is it gonna look
experiences
weird?
that eventually
Yes.
become
Do
the
I
category
care?
of what we
Hell
call mental
no.
illness, mental disorder, and so on. So, in Madness and Civilization,
This is really
Foucault
cool.
traces the history
Really
of the
cute.
category of
I
madness
drew it
to
in the
emphasize
wrong
this
spot.
idea that
Just drew
contemporary
it again.
Western categories and
Okay, there you
knowledges
go.
aren't
Actually,
universal God-given systems of
Yeah,
perfection, but historical social products. And from all the examples and historical documents he brings up, there's this underlying radical idea that contemporary medical pathology is just one of many flawed ways of organizing the knowledge we have about and from those that society declares mad. So there's this thing that Foucault calls the modern period. Basically, right now-ish. And like I said earlier, in this modern period, madness and reason are two opposite concepts. This wasn't always the case. Back in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, madness wasn't considered an innate flaw that belonged to an individual's nature. In some middle-aged Christian contexts, portions of society considered madness to be a divine deliverance, revered by religious institutions as a sign of one's devotion to God and esoteric Christian knowledge. In the Renaissance, we see depictions of madness in literature as a source of knowledge, where mad characters would reveal truths about society in the future. For example, in one of the Shakespeare plays that isn't a metaphor for gay sex, King Lear, the titular character's madness provides insight into King Lear's flaws. King Lear's madness isn't understood as a biological condition of the mind, but a condition of fate and spirit that people in the Renaissance could identify with in their paradigm of madness. It's not that those considered mad were treated well in the Middle Ages. It wasn't exactly a positive attribute. But madness was understood through a different paradigm. Though madness wasn't considered an appropriate state of being, madness wasn't understood as mental illness or as a fundamental biological nature as it is today. Foucault describes that
Madness fascinates because it is knowledge. It is knowledge first because all these absurd figures are, in reality, elements of a difficult, hermetic, esoteric learning.
the point isn't to say that people in the Middle Ages were stupid idiots just waiting for epic Reddit signs to come save them from their ignorance. Nor is this a call to return to these centuries-old rules of propriety. The point is to highlight the changing relationship between knowledge and madness, or in other words, between knowledge and marginalized people. Foucault wants to highlight the idea that knowledge isn't about the search for an eternal truth, but that society's ideas of legitimate or worthy knowledge are products of a culture's system of power. Does anyone else hear that? Oh, it's the 17th century. What's up, man? How you doing? Oh, and what do you have with you? Is that the ideological foundations of the modern human sciences? Yeah, never mind. No solicitors, babe. Okay, so you're not gonna believe this. So around the 17th century, as human sciences began to become a thing, there was a conceptual shift in how Western society viewed knowledge. Because of some weird society stuff, the concept of reason became this new, hot and sexy organizing principle of knowledge. In this new and wacky 17th century, things could only be considered knowledge if they met 17th century standards of reason, which I'm sure were super objective and evaluated by a super diverse group of people. Yep. Now that it's the 17th and 18th century, it went out of fashion to consider madness as a form of knowledge or divine revelation. You know, weird society stuff happened, and suddenly people started to view madness as a fundamental nature, an unreasonable nature. Let's look at the timeline. I mentioned earlier that in some Renaissance Christian contexts, madness could be interpreted as a type of divine godly revelation, or a type of knowledge. But around the 17th century, new paradigms reorganized the way institutions thought about knowledge, where now knowledge had to be derived from reason. Anyone who was anyone wanted to distinguish themselves as reasonable. And anyone who couldn't come off as reasonable basically was not. Those deemed in opposition to reason were dehumanized and written off as beings with fundamental natural flaws.
Oh my god,
These
whatever
included
the fuck.
groups
I
like homosexuals,
care.
sex
I don't
workers,
care.
the poor, basically anyone who knows
These
how to
are-
have fun, and
can
of
I
course,
just
the newly
select them
created
all,
category
please?
of the mentally ill. So madness went
There we
from
go.
a knowledge to
But
a
I
type of
don't want
inherent
these.
unreason that
Thank
emerges
you.
from an individual,
Jesus.
from a revelatory
Did not
knowledge
need to take
to
that
an
long.
inherent flawed nature.
Madness was thus torn from that imaginary freedom which still allowed it to flourish on the Renaissance horizon. Not so long ago it had floundered about in broad daylight in King Lear and Don Quixote, but in less than a half century it had been sequestered and in the fortress of confinement, bound to reason, to the rules of morality, and to their monotonous nights.
But Alex, says my framing device, knowledge is objective. It's true. It's firm. It's universal. But no, that's just the way our culture understands knowledge. Think about it. To create knowledge, a society needs to have paradigms for what it considers legitimate or correct knowledge. Society needs ways of collectively deciding what it considers legitimate knowledge and, importantly, what gets excluded from legitimate knowledge. And while this seems obvious, the less obvious part is the history that we take for granted. Our rules for legitimate knowledge are historical social constructs. We like to think that knowledge production looks like a straight path towards an absolute truth, and that even if it veers off sometimes, it's all heading towards one thing. But that's not the way the world works, because what the hell is that thing? Who gets to decide what that thing is and why? It only looks like a straight path if we assume we're all heading towards the same destination. But we're not. We never are. And why do we even have to have a destination? Why can't we take the scenic route and do a little silly loop-de-loops? Historical and social processes determine the boundaries of this final destination we call truth. Modern Western reason isn't the end of history, it's just one quite limited paradigm for which to understand knowledge that excludes the experiences of a whole lot of people. And I can't emphasize this enough, modern Western reason didn't get to the top of our society's hierarchy of knowledge because it's the perfect idea that beat out everyone in the free marketplace of ideas. The battle for knowledge production is often won through blood, conquest, and oppression. And because of that fact, there's radical scholars today trying to uplift discounted ways of knowing like oral histories, spirituality, indigenous epistemologies, which all have unique qualities that Western reason can't account for. But that's another discussion. Let's talk mental illness. The 17th century was the beginning of what we might call the modern period. Around that time, we start to see new ideas about madness in institutions. As I said, the view of madness shifted from a knowledge to a type of fallen nature, an innocent animality. The mad were people who didn't meet the day's standards of reasonable humanity. But unlike the gays and the poor, according to society, the mad supposedly had no choice in their unreason, and so they were labeled innocent animals. By the time we get to the 18th and 19th century, the idea of madness as innocent animality becomes the modern concept of mental illness. The newly developed fields of human sciences like psychology and, my shame, sociology, construct models of what they thought was proper human nature and conduct. Those who diverged from this path were othered. In this modern period, if your madness went against what was considered proper human conduct, you were declared to have biologically emergent flaws that could be objectively studied as mental illness. To these early psychologists, mental illness was an unfortunate flaw that stripped a person of their humanness. These are the consequences of things like upholding reason. Well, according to the thoughts of some definitely not racist people who now underlie our entire modern legal framework for some reason, human beings are born with the capacity for reason. And that capacity for reason is what gives human beings the natural right to autonomy and self-determination. That means that the fight over who society considers reasonable and unreasonable takes on a lot of weight. If society equates reason with humanity, then we should pay attention to the way society and social groups define reason. And what if reason wasn't ever that hot to begin with, John? What if it's just a word that people use to exclude the oppressed from participating in society, John? Did you ever think of that, John? Did it ever cross your fucking mind, John? And if you're then called mentally ill and therefore have this flaw of innocent animality that takes away your humanity, then you don't have those natural rights to autonomy and self-determination anymore, do you? To be declared mentally ill is to be declared non-human. Now it's up to the psychiatric institution to help you reach your natural human state of reason. Psychiatrists now had the ultimate authority over your humanity. In the essay Psychiatric Power, Foucault states,
Now, what is essentially involved in these power relations was the absolute right of non-madness over madness, a right transcribed into terms of competence brought to bear on an ignorance, of good sense, access to reality, correcting errors, delusions, hallucinations, fantasies, of normality, imposing itself on disorder and deviance. It is this threefold power that constituted madness as an object of possible knowledge for a medical science, that constituted it as an illness, at the very moment when the subject, stricken with his illness, found himself disqualified as insane, which is to say, stripped of any power and any knowledge concerning his illness. We know enough about your suffering and your special condition, things you have no inkling of, to recognise that it is a disease. But we are familiar enough with this disease to know that you can't exercise any right over it or with respect to it. This game, involving a power relation, gives rise to a knowledge, which in return founds the rights of the power in question, characterises classical psychiatry.
He's essentially saying that psychiatry works on the premise that patients' conditions mark them as less than human, and thus gives psychiatrists the ultimate authority over patients as an object of study. That doesn't exactly sound like progressing. It sounds like a framework that, while possibly leading to effective ways of making people productive members of society, doesn't exactly care about the systemic violence involved in that process, or even the ways that patient subjectivity and perspective can, in many cases, work in collaboration with psychiatric expertise. If you take something away from this outline of the history and philosophy of modern psychiatry, take away the idea that mental illness, disability, and disorder are all culturally determined. Knowledges about these conditions are produced in ways that exclude disabled or neurodivergent people from the production of expertise on their own experience. If we can only access reality through social concepts, then that means the construction of reality should probably have some kind of democratic element to it. Psychiatrists aren't the only ones with a stake in reality. Psychiatrists, psychologists, and other experts in the human sciences aren't an evil cabal that want to maintain their absolute power. But the production of human scientific knowledge is a socially conditioned process of production. We all grew up believing in modern knowledge assumptions, and I can understand why it might be difficult to completely abandon that form of reasoning. These assumptions are so difficult to break from because they hold so much power. The ideas I've discussed here might sound like something a millennial grad school dropout posts on Twitter, but they're important. You may not agree with them, but there are entire disciplines that do amazing things with the idea of a socially constructed reality. Because of the work of disabled and neurodivergent activists who leverage critical social theory and people like Foucault who give institutional legitimacy to critical knowledge, it's becoming more common for even scholars within psychiatry and psychology to contest institutional knowledge. If psychiatric knowledge is as socially contingent and unfixed as I just claimed it is, as people have been claiming for hundreds of years, then there are serious conflicts and contradictions within psychiatry that need to be resolved. A 2017 article in the Journal of Disability Studies documents the fact that the legitimacy of psychiatric knowledge is still an active, inconclusive discussion.
Each edition of the DSM has been influenced by the epistemological beliefs of the writers and editors. All editions have had the intent to ensure appropriate and consistent labeling of people with mental health disorders. However, the DSM is controversial even among mental health professionals. Scholars tend to agree the categories are subjective and risk either including everyone or leaving out children with behavior differences that do not come with a label.
If not even psychiatrists agree on things that are supposed to give diagnosis validity and legitimacy, then has diagnosis ever carried as much validity and legitimacy as we think it does? But surely, things like autism are firm structures we can observe in the brain. Autism has concretely studied mechanisms and consistently defined patterns. Well, let's give autism another look. What kind of behaviors do psychologists look for when diagnosing autism? I'm sure they're super objective and exist totally independently of social norms. Luckily, us self-diagnosers carry copies of the DSM-5 like a Bible. So, let's open her up. Oh wow, autism spectrum disorder has its own section. We made it to the top, baby. Okay, here we go. So you need
persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by the following, currently or by history. Deficits in social emotional reciprocity ranging, for example, from abnormal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation, to reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affect, to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions.
Yeah, that actually sounds really objective. It doesn't. What does it mean to have a deficit in social communication? What is an abnormal social approach? What does it mean to have behavior adjusted to suit various social contexts? Can I find an abnormal social approach written on the brain? Is it given to you when you make a Reddit account? Is it written in the stars? How we define abnormal social approach is, well, social, cultural. Foucault noted this quite well. What might be considered knowledge in one age might be considered deviant in another. And I think even the DSM-5 acknowledges that fact.
Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships should be judged against norms for age, gender, and culture.
Oh, so what you're saying is that these crucial diagnostic factors are contingent on the norms we currently have in place. That people can only be diagnosed as autistic when you take into account social norms. That's starting to sound, oh God, socially constructed. The DSM tells psychiatrists to look out for the abnormal, but the abnormal has to refer to a norm within a cultural context. Even the DSM-5 seems to imply that there are some cultures and contexts in which autistic traits are considered an abnormal disorder, and other contexts where that isn't the case. But surely autism isn't just a collection of traits. Surely there's something in the autistic brain that unites every person with a diagnosis. Surely there's some fundamental difference, right? Or else, how can we consider autism to be a neurodevelopmental disorder if order isn't tied to the brain but to social context? Well, we kind of don't know what autism is. There isn't one thing that all autistic people have in common. There isn't any one brain marker, or any one gene, or one experience. Autism is a collection of behaviors and experiences that institutions decided to label disordered. And if you investigate other mental conditions, you'll start to notice similar things. A lot of what connects neurodivergence isn't actually a firm, material, neuroscientific boundary, but a socially determined and politically contested list.
However, in contrast with many other disorders of the brain, for example, neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's diseases, autism lacks any clear unifying pathology at the molecular, cellular, or system levels.
And you could sure as hell bet that there are critical autistic scholars and critical autism studies that reject this idea that autism is a natural kind or an existing thing that is waiting to be found. As critical autistic scholar Larry Arnold puts it,
I do not, however, assume that autism or any other currently described category of disorder is a natural kind. On the contrary, I assume that the description and social situation of autism, and by extension other disorders, is a construction born out of a constellation of neurological traits that have come to the fore and been labeled in this way for historical reasons.
for Arnold, autism is like, I've been arguing, a social construct. This isn't to say that autism isn't real or has no basis in reality, but that it's a category that attempts to organize very complicated reality into a single label. not every scholar of autism holds this view. There are people who have tried to theorize autism as having one unifying trait. For example, Simon Baron Cohen, alongside his colleagues Alan M. Leslie and Ultra Frith, argue that people with autism are united in the fact that they do not have or have difficulty with theory of mind. For those unfamiliar, a theory of mind is the ability to understand what's going on in the minds of other people. Famous advocates of this theory, like Baron Cohen, argue that autistic people just have no clue what's going on in the minds of the people they socialize with. Well, according to the scientific literature, the theory of mind sucks shit. The theory of mid doesn't have much empirical support. From one small study of 20 autistic children in the 1980s, Baron Cohen spawned a gargantuan theory that promised to identify the unique, defining trait of autism. In the process, these researchers continuously reinforced the idea that theory of mind was an essential aspect of humanness and humanity, and that autistic people lack humanity. Several studies have tried to replicate the original theory of mind study and other studies done by Baron Cohen, and guess what? Autistic people, yes, diagnosed autistic people, demonstrated that they did in fact have a theory of mind. And despite the lack of empirical support and the ways theory of mind dehumanizes autistic people, these ideas still hold institutional legitimacy. It doesn't hold that legitimacy because it's a proven fact. It was just a compelling theory that fit the paradigms of knowledge popular at the time. A paradigm in which autistic people and other people with mental conditions are seen as less than human. These psychiatrists will cling to theories that uphold psychiatric legitimacy even if these theories blatantly demonstrate the ways the system will maintain its own unreason in the name of declaring others unreasonable. It's time to stop pretending like we have a firm scientific understanding of neurodivergent identities, and therefore the right to self-righteously gatekeep their meaning. These identities, like all identities, are socially contingent. That category holds a lot of power. It's a category that unites neurodivergent communities and allows people to get institutional support. The idea of social construction does not deny any of that. It only claims that these categories aren't things that we find in a pure natural form. The truth about autism isn't out there waiting to be discovered in its universality, because autism, neurodivergence, and mental conditions have no truth that exists independent of social life, culture, ideology, and power.
That which we call autism is contingent on time and era as a form of shifting discourse. That constellation of neurological traits has always existed in one form or another, but each of them has been the subject of different foci as to which are the most prominent in terms of what is being constructed as either impairment or maladjustment within a strictly limited context. This context is often invisible to the actors as they are immersed within it.
And despite this being demonstrated time and time again across all these different social categories, there's a part of me that wants to believe that institutions, including psychiatry, when practiced well, are the best thing we have. I mean, shouldn't we aim towards a democratically effective truth? But I'm also plagued by the knowledge that as long as humans use language to describe things, to make categories, and use each other to build these categories, reality will never not be socially constructed, socially limited. My intention in highlighting these ideas is not to say that one random person's word is just as good as any institution's, and that your TikTok feed is better than the DSM in identifying helpful mental health resources. But before we go around criticizing TikToks by upholding the authority of psychiatric knowledge in this uncritical light, in determining reality as we know it, we should be conscious of the ways that both a stupid TikTok and psychiatric knowledge have cultural baggage. I don't think these two cultural products are on level playing fields, but that's not because I think that mental illness is a real biological natural object waiting for some fart-smelling psychiatrist to discover them. If there's any reason I might be inclined to uphold the legitimacy of a psychiatric diagnosis, it would only be because I've seen people who have been helped through these labels and resources given to them by psychiatrists and therapists. At this point, Any critical person might say, yeah, it seems that a lot of people feel better after psychiatric help, but is that because that was the only legitimate option presented? And what about the shit ton of people alienated by psychiatric institutions? Yeah, I hear that. I hear Foucault. I hear critical scholars. They're right. The psychiatric institution was not built for people like me. It wasn't built to humanize. As scholar Devin Price documents, autism has historically been studied in how it appears in young white boys. We have to live with the consequences of that.
Usually, it's white boys with conventionally masculine interests and hobbies that are flagged as potentially autistic when they are young. Even within that relatively privileged class, it's almost exclusively wealthy and upper middle class autistic kids who get identified. That group has always been the prototype for autism when it's described by clinicians or depicted in media. All the diagnostic criteria for autism are based on how it presents in this group. Every autistic person is hurt by this narrow conception of the disorder, even the white, rich, cisgender boys who are most likely to be afflicted by it.
And that's not just a fact that you regurgitate in your social justice circle. It's a fact that, along with all the other biased conceptions of autism, has real implications for autistic people seeking diagnosis.
I've been looking for that diagnosis for years now. I finally found a center that provides everything you need for diagnosis. I saw a psychiatrist for the second time this week, expecting to start my assessment. But no, she apparently decided that I don't have autism based on our 2 sessions together. She said, and I quote, "I think you don't have autism because we can have a conversation with you, and you can respond to my questions."
After several questionnaires and meetings, the psychiatrist said, "It's very unlikely I'm autistic." I won't outright reject it, but his reasons given seem weak. I told him I struggle working out how other people feel, cognitive empathy, but I'm overly sensitive to emotion if I know how a person feels, affective empathy, and he said it's usually backwards. That autistic people can deduce how other people feel, they just don't care.
I told my therapist today, against my better judgment, that I was recently diagnosed with ASD, and what she said in response really bothered me. She told me I shouldn't call myself autistic and should say I'm on the spectrum, because most autistic people never live outside of their parents' house.
Went to psychiatrists, know whether I have adult autism or not, and before she even listened, she said that autism is trendy now. 10 years ago, everyone had ADHD. Now, apparently, everyone thinks they have autism.
I'll say it. Maybe TikTok does encourage 12-year-olds to frivolously latch onto serious labels. What a novel concept. But if there's any real problem TikTok might be causing, it's the people being denied by therapists an evaluation because therapists believe that autism is trendy now. I reject this notion that people seeking professional evaluations are only self-diagnosed TikTokers or a part of the trend. Therapists should know better. And I don't see any reason why self-diagnosis as a concept should be seen with such disgust, annoyance, cringe. Is that it? Cringe? I've spent the better part of a decade wondering why I feel so cringe. Why do I feel so different? So alienated by my social uncertainty, so weirdly looked upon because of the way I enjoy things, so awkward about the way my body occupies space. If autism isn't a thing in the world or in the brain, if it's socially constructed, yet still a very real and very experienced category, then what if autism's ontology, or its being, is constituted by a relationship to power and knowledge? What if autism and other neurodivergence is a distinct relationship to our socially constructed reality? You might even say that it's a break with that reality. And autistic people form community.
This is intense, but
relationship to power.
gotta have something running in the background for my head.
That despite not having a diagnosis.
You know, all the little guys that sit around your head yelling at you to
I know myself.
Go watch the
I know
newest
who I am. So you know what?
TV show. I don't know what I'm saying.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get
It's either music or YouTube videos, and we're on YouTube videos. And this one's, oh my god, there's 15 more minutes. When did YouTube videos become the movie theater?
To whom it may concern. Alexander Avila came to the SAC Center for a diagnostic evaluation to assess if he meets criteria for a diagnosis of ADHD or any other psychological or emotional challenges. Based on the clinical interview and assessments given, it was determined that he does meet criteria for a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. He has functional impairments in social emotional deficits in nonverbal and challenges developing. He has highly restricted fixated interests that are as well. He struggles with hyperreactivity and inflexible adherence to routines. These patterns of behavior have been present since he was a young age and became more apparent as he developed. They are not better explained by another mental or physical health condition. Regards, George Sachs, clinical psychologist and ASD and ADHD specialist.
Here it is. Written in black and white by a psychologist. It turns out I'm autistic. I'm autistic. I'm freaking autistic. I'm so fucking autistic. I'm omega autistic. Autistic. I'm
See, when I got my ADHD diagnosis,
I know myself.
I can't read.
I told you I know myself.
Cannot read.
Right?
Hi, my name's Sky. I'm 22. Can't read. Don't know how to read. I'm actually 21, but whatever.
Can you
Close
self-diagnose
enough.
yourself if there is no self? It might sound like a question only the right amount of drugs can produce, but in fact, the question of the self is one of the principal preoccupations of 20th century Western philosophy. What is a self? Some people believe that the self is an internal essence, perhaps even an immaterial soul that gives our experience a sense of coherent grounding. But we don't exactly have access to this self, or the tools to draw firm lines around what exactly constitutes the self. It's a concept we take for granted, especially when liberal societies constantly hold up self-expression as a type of freedom we should all strive for. But if you really think about it, what is it that you're expressing? In one of the most baller moves of the 20th century, certain strains of philosophy began to contest the idea that the self, or in philosophical terms, the subject, even exists in the way we think it does. It's too complicated to explain within the time frame I have, so I'll definitely do it anyways. Alright, so this shit goes back to the 1600s, when this dude named Descartes popularized the idea that the self, or the subject, exists as a coherent thinking thing independent of everything else. After taking the wrong amount of drugs, Descartes came up with this thought experiment in which he had to radically doubt the existence of everything he couldn't prove. Well, that rules out the outside world. There's no way to prove that we aren't living in a simulation. So he said, damn, I think, therefore I am. The only thing Descartes could prove was the fact that he existed as a thinking subject. And this idea of a thinking subject who perceives and thinks about objects proceeded to become the foundation of liberal philosophical thought. Libs began to define what it meant to be a subject, but as time went on, a bunch of alienated betas began to find issues with this whole subject business. Like, low-key, like, what if we're not coherent thinking subjects, disconnected from the world, but instead subjects that, like, kind of exist in the world, connected to the world? Not actually thinking that deeply or rationally? In fact, I haven't thought in years. Or what if subjectivity, that is, our experience of being a subject, isn't as coherent as we perceive it to be? What if there isn't one thinking subject, but a split between conscious and unconscious minds, where the unconscious mind governs our thoughts and behaviors in complex ways? What if language forces us to enter a symbolic world in which we can only conceive of ourselves symbolically and therefore are inherently alienated by the symbolic self-concept that could never fully represent what it's supposed to signify? What if P and if not poop. So we don't exactly know
Me
what
for
it
real.
means to be poop. Is it really possible to draw firm boundaries
What
between
if pee
ourselves and the
if
world?
not poop?
Probably not. Vsauce, Michael here. Have you ever wondered where your thoughts come from? Are they your thoughts or society's thoughts? Like when we see a green light, we're conditioned by society to at least associate that green light with go. Or when we see another person, we're conditioned by society to judge that person based on a certain set of standards given to us by society. And if you think you have a unique set of standards or that you deviate from the norm, do you not judge your uniqueness in reference to those established norms? Otherwise, how do you know you're unique? Don't all our thoughts have to be articulated through language, which is an inherently social concept? Put together, this kind of implies that our thoughts can never really escape language and social media. We're not the rational, disconnected subject Descartes thinks that we, therefore, are. Is there any part of you that is wholly original? And if there isn't, then do you really exist? The favorite problematic bald man of unemployed sodomites, Michel Foucault, would argue that there really isn't a way to separate your selfhood from power. In Foucault's work, the self or the subject is an effect of power. Power sets the type of discourses dominant in a given society, and those discourses give cultural meaning to what it means to be a subject. This is the process of subjectivation, or subjectification, or subjection. It doesn't matter. For example, like institutions will discuss things like what it means to be a criminal. And through this process of subjectification, people who fit these cultural ideas of criminality then become criminal subjects in the eyes of society. People labeled criminal subjects are perceived by the world as criminal subjects, and they perceive what it feels like to be a criminal subject. Society creates subjects and the experience of what it feels like to occupy that subject position. That experience is called subjectivity. Society creates subjects, and it creates the subjectivity. Society gives meaning to categories like man or homosexual or student or middle class, and it creates the subjective experience, the subjectivity of living in these categories. And the insidious part of this process, the reason why Foucault found this so pernicious, is in how society tries to hide the ways in which subjectivity and subjecthood is a social and historical process. We start to believe in these subjectivities. We may even believe that certain subjects are universal givens or natural products. We start to believe that some people are born criminals, that poor people will always be poor, that
Oh,
gay
it
people
does
will
scan.
always be annoying, and that students are best
Oh, that's so cool.
and women are the
That's
ones with
so
essentially
cool.
different characteristics and essences.
I just
We
can't
create
scan
sciences and
if.
knowledges that justify the beliefs we have about subjects and subject positions. We become socialized into our own subjectivities and lose sight of the way our subjectivities are constructed by society in complicated ways. All our different subject positions intersect in ways that give us a sense of selfhood. Society gives us a language from which to understand and locate how our experiences fit into a social web. But the language we use to describe ourselves is never really ours. The self, or the subject, only comes into being when power organizes our social language into intelligible subject positions. When Foucault wrote Madness and Civilization, his intention was not just to show the social construction of mental conditions, he also wanted to demonstrate that psychiatric institutions have the power to define how we understand our mental experiences, and that we, as subjects, are forced to believe in that reality of psychiatric language. Psychiatric institutions give us a historically specific language about what it calls mental illness, and we as subjects accept that language. Okay, so neurodivergence. Society makes us into subjects and defines the ways subjects can be understood. The consequences of this for those with mental condition is in how we become defined by the labels put upon us. People are socialized to understand neurodivergent subjects through biomedical discourses because that's the way psychiatry frames neurodivergence. As neurodivergent writer Remy Urgio explains,
I mean to suggest that mental disability always leaves something behind, and in leaving something behind, mental disability takes over. When one is schizophrenic, for example, her rhetorical actions are rendered as less symbolic actions and more as biological motions. Schizophrenia causes the person to act. The schizophrenic person in these constructions has no volition, or whatever volition she has is tempered by the schizophrenia. In this regard, it's important to note that whatever the placeholder, whether schizophrenia, autism, depression, cerebral palsy, ADHD, bipolar, mental disability signals a kind of rhetorical involuntariness. Mental disability wields more agency than mentally disabled people.
Mental illness, that is, the construction of mental illness, speaks louder than the person because all of the language we have to express ourselves is created by others. If all language is social and power dynamics control the social, then all the language we have to describe ourselves and others is an effect of power. This presents us with a bit of a hairy pickle. The great predicament of selfhood. We as humans need language to experience existence, to understand and to communicate, but language fundamentally alienates us because it can never capture the entirety of existence. Famous SJW Judith Butler expands on the sorrowful psychic experience of subjecthood in their book, The Psychic Life of Power.
How is it that the subject is the kind of being who can be exploited, who is, by virtue of its own formation, vulnerable to subjugation? Bound to seek recognition of its own existence in categories, terms, and names that are not of its own making, the subject seeks the sign of its own existence outside itself, in a discourse that is at once dominant and indifferent. Social categories signify subordination and existence at once. In other words, within subjection, the price of existence is subordination. Precisely at the moment in which choice is impossible, the subject pursues subordination as the promise of existence.
We're all born living these unique narratives of existence. We have these unique ways of being and biographies that reflect how our beings develop over time. Society takes these unique experiences, categorizes them, defines them, and gives them a history and social meaning. And knowing your identity has a history can be a powerful thing. It's something we long for, but we end up having to understand ourselves and these narratives in ways power defines.
What autism provided was a discursive framework, a lens through which others could story my life. My hand and full body movements became self-stimulatory behaviors. My years-long obsession with maps and the Electric Light Orchestra became perservations. My repetition of lines from the movie Airplane became echolalia. My very being became a story, a text in dire need of professional analysis. This, my body, this was autism. And suddenly, with the neuropsychologist's signature on my diagnostic papers, I was no longer my body's.
We're born into these histories and cling on to labels that we feel describe who we are. And through this clinging, the distinction between the label and our self disappears as if it never existed. These subject positions are powerful. In the case of autism, the autistic label is backed by the legitimacy of the psychiatric institution. And to a lot of people, that legitimacy gives our experiences a concrete realness. Finally, there's a name for my suffering, a name for my unique joys. My world has become intelligible. So it makes sense why people have negative reactions to self-diagnosis. If these institutions give our experiences legitimacy, if they constitute the foundation of our subjective experience, of course we're going to instinctively defend those institutions. But as philosophers and sociologists keep uncovering again and again, these subject positions aren't written into the fabric of the universe, into your brain or your genes. These subject positions don't describe anything except a way for society to understand how your body's autobiography fits into a larger history. Sure, these subject positions describe real behaviors and real experiences, but these real things become categorized and are given a position in a web we call social structure. We socially define what that structural position is. If subjectivity is an effect of power, if the self is created by relations of power, then the struggle to control the self and subjectivity is a political struggle. Subject positions are politically defined. Autism as a subject position is a politically defined construct. Just look at the ways neurodivergent and disabled activists seek to control, unfix, and destabilize how the neurodivergent and disabled subject is defined by society. Autism as a subject position is not a biological structure or a natural thing. Like all subject positions, autism is a relationship to the social world. And if you resonate with the autistic relationship to the world, you probably know. If you're neurodivergent, you know pretty early on that you will diverge. Psychiatry tries to take this experience, pathologize it, and dehumanize those who experience it. And it tries to correct this so-called disorder. But if you're like me, and your goal is to ensure that society is inclusive, such that we're all given the opportunity to live a good life, then is this really the best way to understand neurodivergence as an innocent animality that only psychiatric institutions can understand and correct? There's a growing movement of politically engaged neurodivergent people who want to challenge psychiatric power. They see autism as the way I described it, as a unique relationship to the social world. It's a unique relationship to the social world that itself challenges the standards set up by a neurotypical society. And in that sense, autism is the site of a political struggle. How useful is it to pathologize and instrumentally regulate the site of a political struggle? Do we not all have a right to access alternative tools for self-expression if we need them? Because to pathologize that need and that right would be to continue to perpetuate the project of subjection and psychiatric power. So you know what? Here's my letter. Here's my diagnosis. This is what I think of it. I know why labels exist. Labels and categories make it really easy to find community and access accommodations. Institutions, as evil as Foucault claims them to be, often use their power to help people attain the resources they need. And how do you identify who needs resources? Yeah, a label probably helps. It's not my intention to discredit those who have been touched by psychiatry or who find comfort in the labels that society gives us. But I think it wouldn't hurt to also reflect on the histories and the underlying assumptions that sustain the institutions we move through. When people discount self-diagnosis, is it actually out of a concern for neurodivergent people or mental health? Or is there an underlying uncritical belief in the ultimate authority of the non-neurodivergent to create the truth about the neurodivergent? No, Alex, you don't get it. These fake self-diagnosers take away resources from real autistic people. But is it actually self-diagnosers taking away resources? Because last I checked, these resources are distributed by institutions, not people with self-diagnosed mental conditions. Sometimes I get the vibe that some neurodivergent people have a negative reaction to self-diagnosis because of this "they haven't suffered like I have" mentality. But two things. First, we don't have to understand autism purely through negativity. Autism provides a unique way of viewing the world that doesn't have to be interpreted through a totally negative lens. Yeah, maybe I've gotten a kidney stone or two from neglecting basic bodily functions while focusing on a project, but I also kind of ate that shit up. Second, I can assure you that social alienation and suffering is one of the biggest factors which drives self-diagnosed people to seek a label. The majority of self-diagnosed people aren't seeking a trendy identity. And if they are, maybe they're 12. Why are you fighting with a 12-year-old? I don't claim to speak for all autistic or neurodivergent people or people with mental conditions or disabilities. And there's plenty of people who have been helped by psychiatric methods. My own anxiety disorder was treated in a clinical setting. You know what? It helped. This piece of paper gets people accommodations. Disabled people rely on diagnoses to get government benefits and necessary assistance. I thought of the ways that I could destroy this letter. But this paper describes my relationship to an institution, and I can't destroy that history. I shouldn't. Maybe I don't want to. Is it because I, like the people I criticize, also cling to language I can create? Because if I rip this letter, is my claim to legitimacy and realness gone? If, as Judith Butler says, the price of existence is subjection, then will I also be destroyed alongside this piece of paper? I don't know.
If you'd like to support my work, please visit patreon.com/aretheygay and consider pledging as little as $1 to help keep the channel running. Special thanks to my patrons: Aaron Silo, Adeline Grubb, Aiden Iftikhar, Allison, All Pizzas Are Personal, Anna Midkiff, Autumn Moore,
Okay.
Avery.
Not watching something that intense anymore.
Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday, your #1 resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. Meta just showed off 2 new VR prototypes that look absolutely insane, from perfect pass-through to the return of varifocal displays in the public eye with the highest resolution yet. They're unlike anything we've ever seen before. But that's not it. A brand new 4K per eye VR headset from a very unlikely source has just popped up. Horizon Worlds may actually be getting pretty good, and rest in peace, Echo VR. We got all that and so much more, so let's just get right into the news. Okay, so let's start off with something absolutely crazy and unexpected. A brand new VR headset has just popped up from an unlikely source with some pretty wild specs to back it up. Just recently leaked, but then confirmed by the company, this is the Visor, a micro OLED 4K per eye VR headset set to launch sometime next year from the software company Immersed. Now, some of you may be familiar with Immersed, but in case you've never heard of it, Immersed is a productivity application that I've actually used quite a bit before. It's basically the only application out there that allows you to connect to pretty much any PC or Mac and set up to 5 virtual monitors in your play space to, well, work on things. And it seems that this headset isn't so much what you'd think of as a typical VR headset like a Quest 2 or beyond, but instead an extension of the Immersed application. Right now, it doesn't look like this is going to work with many other applications, and while this headset is supposedly 6 degree of freedom and does have these 4K per eye micro OLED displays, all of that is primarily intended for virtual monitor viewing, not so much gaming or anything else. Which kind of makes sense, I suppose. I think the only real complaint I've had with Immersed is that the typical 2K per eye resolutions that we have on most VR headsets just isn't really enough to be a true monitor replacement, which is, I think, why Immersed is working on their own hardware. But I guess I do have some concerns if it doesn't work with OpenXR or Steam VR. It would just be a shame considering the hardware specifications. But I also have to mention I haven't actually seen any hardware yet or had it in hands. I've only seen renders so far. And until I see it and actually try the hardware, well, it's not actually hardware yet. So I'm definitely staying a little skeptical until I actually try it. The Immersed CEO did state that there's going to be way more information in a public release tomorrow, but now we can get into these meta prototypes because, I mean, just look at these things. They're absolutely wild. But also in this conversation, I want to talk about how different this R&D side of Meta is compared to everything that we see publicly, because that has a big part in what these prototypes will mean for the future of VR and how they'll trickle down to consumer headsets in the future. And on top of that, you may actually get to try one of these, which is also crazy. But let's just start with the wild looking one before we get into the one that I'm really excited about. This is the Flamera, a prototype meant to explore potential solutions to a big problem that Meta has had. Well, really a problem that everyone has had, and it has to do with perspective and stereo correct pass-through. The issue is basically, how do you offer perspective-correct mixed reality with cameras that aren't directly placed in front of your eyes? If you've got cameras below or above or to the right, well, it's just not going to be perspective-correct. And right now, the way that most pass-through works, like for example on the Quest 2, is Meta takes the total image of the pass-through cameras and calculates a reprojection of the camera feed into approximately the correct position for your eyes, allowing you to see pass-through mostly correctly from the right perspective. But as I'm sure you've noticed if you've ever tried one of these headsets, this leads to a wobbly, distorted image with lots of visual artifacts. But with Flamera, they took a totally different approach with something called a light-filled pass-through. Instead of one lens per camera sensor, Flamera uses a lens array that only lets in relevant light to the sensor, and that information is then stitched together into one single image that you see from your perspective correct vision. And as you can see from the Through the Lens video, this is probably the most accurate pass-through I've ever seen on a VR headset. And it's almost comical when they switch back to the reprojection-based pass-through as a comparison. It's crystal clear versus, I don't know, a muddy mess. And we'll get back to the Flamera's purpose in a moment, but I want to talk about the other prototype, the one that I'm really excited about personally. This is Butterscotch Varifocal, an iteration on something that we talked about a few months ago. So for a long time now, the holy grail of VR optics have been something called varifocal displays. I've talked about them a bit in the past, but it's been a while, so I'm gonna do a very, very simplified recap for a moment. While Flamera looks to solve a few problems with pass-through, Butterscotch looks to solve a much deeper problem with VR in general, a phenomenon known as the Vergence Accommodation Conflict. And if you've ever tried to hold an object in VR really close to your face, you've probably already experienced this problem. Everything will get really blurry, and you may even go cross-eyed or get a little disoriented. The problem is that VR headsets and lenses just don't act like our eyes and brain, and that not only makes things look unrealistic, but it can also lead to some pretty unpleasant effects like eye strain or disorientation. And varifocal displays look to solve this by shifting the focal plane depending on what you're looking at, which makes VR look incredibly realistic because it's mimicking that natural blur and focus that we have in reality. It's shifting the focal plane like your eyes would, but of course the screen is still...
If we're...
staying the same distance away. And we've seen varifocal prototypes before with the Half Dome 1, 2, and 3, even seeing a non-mechanical varifocal system with the third one, but this Butterscotch prototype is special because it not only has these varifocal displays, but also has probably the highest resolution and pixels per degree of any VR headset ever made, at least any of them that's publicly talked about, with a whopping 55 pixels per degree. To give some reference, the Valve Index sits at only 14 ppd, and the Quest 2 only has around 20. And of course, this comes at some downsides for Butterscotch. It only has a 50-degree field of view, which may sound laughable. It's also expensive, mechanical, and probably pretty heavy. But for those 50 degrees, this right now is probably the most realistic experience that you can get on the entire planet. Between varifocal displays and this super high resolution, depth is rendered much more correctly than anything else, and the image is clearer than anything else. Which gets us onto why these even matter. This technology probably isn't trickling into the Quest 4 anytime soon. But what's going on in those labs is still legitimately the cutting edge of this technology. Looking at this technology is the equivalent of being interested in physics and hearing there's a new particle or something and getting excited. Or maybe even just getting excited about the potentials of a new ambient temperature superconductor, for example. It may not change your buying habits tomorrow, but it's still really interesting at the core of the tech. And I think it's even more interesting how different Meta's R&D division is from its consumer division. Outlined in a recent blog from the R&D team, the goals of the Reality Labs research team isn't necessarily to try and build the best consumer device ever that makes VR go mainstream. It's to explore and solve the problems of VR that nobody is touching, and also, surprisingly, to do it openly so this research is available to people that want to build. I mean, the article opens with, quote, "There are two types of people, those who think VR will change the world and those who haven't tried it yet." And I think oftentimes in my video, I give Meta a really hard time, and sometimes that's really necessary, but it's pretty eye-opening to see that behind these Zuckerbergs and metaverse claims, and the honestly off-putting consumer-facing side of the company, the heart of it that is really driving VR research forward by decades is really
actually in it for the right reasons. And I think this really resonates with me because the main reason I actually became so passionate about VR isn't because of Beat Saber or VR Chat or Quest 2s. It's really because every step we take to explore virtual reality and this cool technology, we in turn learn more and more about the physical world around us. I don't think there's ever been a technology out there that really looks at perception and reality in the way that virtual reality does. And the same goes for augmented reality and XR, of course. But you get the point, and I think some people will get that, and some people will only see the industry for dollar signs. But from the way that the research team talks about VR, I don't get that feel, especially because of their whole plan to actually show these headsets off. The impact that they want to make isn't just developing and researching, they plan on inspiring the industry through a whole philosophy of, quote, demo or die. They obviously can't sell Butterscotch because it would probably cost more than a house to buy, but they can demo it to as many people as possible to inspire them to get into this field, to show them how good it can be when the proper work is done. So, Butterscotch, Varifocal, and Flamera will both be at SIGGRAPH this year for people to demo, which is really, really cool. And honestly, maybe the consumer side of Meta could use a little of the R&D team's energy. It might really do them some good. And really, at this point, I don't mind Meta spending all their money on the R&D team. Keep doing that, they deserve it. Which brings us to the sad part of today's video. Despite the in-person protests where fans literally flew a plane over Meta's HQ begging them not to do it and the online protests asking them to do the same, officially at 10 a.m. yesterday, the Echo VR servers were shut down forever. After 6 years of becoming one of the most beloved VR titles ever released, I mean, this game even has a big part of this channel's history too. It was the background footage of my very first video, but now the servers are dead and the game's gone. And I've already made 2 videos on this topic earlier this year when it was first announced, and I've already said my piece, and that's even been echoed by people like Critical. But now that it's happened, I guess this is a bit of closure. Really, the whole situation regarding Echo was just a really crappy thing on Meta and Ready at Dawn's part. The game, despite having a lower active user count than something like Gorilla Tag, still had a community of tens of thousands that played every single day, which is hard to do in VR. Hundreds of games try it, and a handful end up actually building any sort of community. And it's just a real head scratcher why Meta would decide to shut down a perfectly good game that still had a lot of life left in it. And it's also where the consumer-facing side of Meta, ironically, is more anti-consumer than the research side. That doesn't interact with consumers at all. And all I can really say regarding Echo VR is rest in peace. You'll go down forever as a highlight in VR history, something that brought people together. And to you, Meta, taking down a game with an active player population with 0 recourse, kind of a dick move. And it does make it feel like you don't care about people, which isn't the best look. And I also know that people are tired of me talking about this, probably because you guys didn't play Echo at all, and that's perfectly fine. I totally understand if you don't care about the Echo situation. But to all the people that did get burnt, it's hard not to be empathetic, especially in a situation where no empathy was given by the head company. But really, just moving forward, I truly hope that next month when Connect happens, Meta has something really good to replace Echo with. Maybe that was why they canceled it in the first place, and I hope that's the case. I will just say that in the future, if you ever do this sort of thing again, maybe announce the replacement first before you just rip down a game. I don't know. But anyways, Connect, Meta's yearly event where they normally release hardware and where the Quest 3 and probably a bunch of other VR titles will be released or at least announced, crossing my fingers for GTA, has had its dates confirmed. This year, September 27th and 28th, Meta's VR ambitions will take its next step. And as we get closer to that, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more from it. So probably one of the more surprising things this news day isn't so much the prototypes in Visor, it's actually the potential that Horizon Worlds, Meta's VR social platform, may actually be getting pretty good. After months of getting memed and Meta struggling to grow its user base, a pretty huge promised feature, asset importing, has finally showed up, well, at least for some people. And to showcase this, a first-party Horizon World, Super Rumbles, has just released, and it's a first-person shooter within the platform, and it's actually pretty darn good. I think a lot of people think I hate Horizon Worlds, which is not necessarily true. It just was really bad for a long period of time, which doesn't look great for meta or optics. That's the reason why it was memed. But after giving this a go, I do think this is a definite step in the right direction, and I'm really curious to see where Horizon goes in the next year, especially considering that after years of rumors, Roblox has officially made it to the Quest Store. Well, not the main App Store, but it's on App Lab in beta with a few limitations. And it's also not too bad, actually. There's been a lot of hate for it as well, which I can definitely understand. Right now, there are very few working VR builds that show off the capabilities of Roblox VR. And out of those working builds, the frame rate and controls leave a lot to be desired, and the Quest 2 definitely has a hard time keeping up with Roblox, but that's kind of the point of the beta, to get significantly more VR testers in, and also to get people to make more VR content for Roblox. And I think between VR Chat, Horizon Worlds, Rec Room, and Roblox, social VR is about to get very interesting over the next year. And I'm really curious to see what this competition brings out in all of these platforms. But now it's time for question of the week from Nosyless. If you could have any flat screen game of your choice get a VR port, what would I choose? So I've actually answered this a few times, as each time my answer gets a little different. For a while, I really wanted a good Overwatch style game that allows me to be in the action. Like imagine holding a Reinhardt shield or taking out a Genji blade. But my ideas have kind of evolved over time. I still would love to see Overwatch in VR. But right now, I imagine if I could bring a flat game or a hypothetical game into VR, I'd honestly love to play a Yu-Gi-Oh! Social VR trading card game. Of course, I'd love a Pokemon game as well, but that's kind of obvious. Who wouldn't want to catch a Pokemon in VR? But there's just something unique in my brain about grabbing a dual disc and slamming a Blue Eyes White Dragon on the field to have it show up 30 feet tall in front of me. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. And that was question of the week. Make sure to leave your own down below, and I may just answer yours next. And I also want to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters for making this video possible, especially my Omegas. And of course, remember to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill Out.
There's nothing more powerful than you. Making your thing happen. Really going for it. Doing business on your terms. Giving it your all. Making a difference.
Right now, a game made for VR typically takes between 20 to 100,000 USD to develop, and they're typically fairly simple, abbreviated experiences. Half-Life Alyx has won several awards across the board and is arguably the best VR game made so far. Developer Valve hasn't released the financials, but speculation puts the estimate somewhere between $29 and $75 million. How would you like to play a game in VR that's raised almost $600 million? I remember when I got the HTC Vive, which back then was the OG of VR headsets along with the Oculus Rift. I messed with a bunch of VR games that really kind of mounted to VR demos, if we're being real, but I wanted a real AAA VR experience, and after I did my Googles, I bought Elite Dangerous and cranked it up. I didn't know what the hell I was doing because I had never played a space sim or anything as complex as Elite, but the moment the tutorial loaded up, I went completely silent. I was in the cockpit of a spaceship in the middle of an asteroid belt, and that was mind-blowing. Looked around and saw my body and the ship controls, a small storage space for a drink or something, and a bit of the outside of the ship, and if I raised my real body up a bit, I could see even more outside the canopy. And right then and there, I knew I would be all about this game for a long, long time. Flying a spaceship in VR felt like the pinnacle of gaming at the time, and it probably still would, except between Elite Dangerous development going all 6s and 7s and dealing with the mountains of cables the Vive required, it was tough to stick with it for years on end. But now that Star Citizen is starting to get through the biggest of the technical barriers and the pace of development is picking up a low steam, a huge infatuation with the idea of experiencing the Star Citizen universe in virtual reality is re-emerging within the community. Sylvan, a senior engine programmer at CIG, has put it out there that he's ready to kick off VR and even said he doesn't know how long it'll take, but as soon as Vulkan is working, he'll implement it, even if he has to do it in his spare time. When somebody's that motivated to get it going, you know it's a question of when and not if. But Star Citizen is a lot different than Elite Dangerous. It's ambitious, it's sexy, it wants to do everything in a super detailed, high fidelity, loud way. So, VR integration, what would that even look like? To start answering that question, let's take a quick look-see at what already exists. Elite Dangerous is second to none as far as VR spaceflight, mainly because the only real competition is No Man's Sky, and as impressive as No Man's Sky's evolution has been, its flight model and execution is more arcade-like, so we'll stick with Elite. If I didn't say it enough in the beginning, flying in VR is the bee's knees for the real OGs. Initially, you sit there with your mouth open because this ship that you've been staring at on a flat screen is suddenly all around you. It's a difficult feeling to translate. It's more significant than seeing a car or even a house online and then actually being inside it, probably because it's a sci-fi set piece that doesn't exist in real life, but here you are. And there's all your controls, and there's your feet, and you never notice how high off the floor they are. And for at least the next 5-10 minutes, that's what you'll be doing, looking around in amazement because it's brand new all over again. You'll notice the difference in the scale of the space that you're in. Flat games on monitors translate everything like a long camera lens that compresses everything together. VR delivers the proper scale of your environment, and it's impossible to show in the video, but when you experience it, it's a sight to behold. After you pull your eyes off your ship interior, you'll be ready to put those thrusters to work. The hangar doors will open and you'll be let loose on the universe. Hopefully you'll be in an area with some traffic coming in and out, because as cool as the interior is, seeing other ships going about their business really glues you into that sticky trap of existing in a futuristic sci-fi continuum. Everything is now physically bigger, and your place in it all will, at least initially, feel smaller. You're just one of many other people in AI, each with their own objectives and jobs. Before you get too deep into your philosophical soliloquy, you might get hit with a little vertigo, especially if you're motion sensitive, but it's not a vomit comet. As you're out there barrel rolling, looping, maybe both at the same time, your brain will be telling your body it's moving, and in the confusion, you might need to log out and take breaks. But it's all good though. Even astronauts train for motion sickness. Crybaby. Side note, if you don't have a good old astronaut chair to train with, but you want to be ready for Star Citizen VR, Aircar is a great place to start. Maybe I'll do a vid with some other VR space and flying games later, but Aircar is free, pretty damn cool looking, and it's a tiny taste of flying in VR while you wait on Star Citizen. It's also good for bringing up a point that you might not have considered. To fly your Aircar, you just have the basic controls needed for 6 degrees of freedom style flight, all of which fits on the touch controls or a controller, so you don't have to worry about your mouse and keyboard. Star Citizen, on the other hand, we all know that game has enough buttons to feed the needy and more incoming all the time. How do you deal with all that in VR? When I first started Elite, it was my first PC game ever, so I just had a basic mouse and keyboard, and I would have to lift my headset up all the time to find the key I need to press. Super far from an ideal way to play. You can turn on pass-through long enough to take a look, but that's just as bad for killing them immersive vibes. The next best thing is do your best to bind everything you can to a controller. The homie Jules has a vid series called Couch Citizen to help you do that with no compromises. The best options are HOTAs or HOSAs. A lot of HOTAs have a ton of buttons for the copious amount of bindings you need, and even mode toggles, which give buttons different functions for different use cases. But not all of them are sprouting switches and buttons everywhere, are they? If you have something like a T-Flight or even an X52 Pro, you're still gonna have to rely on the keyboard for some things. In that situation, I would suggest having a gamepad on the side, the little single-hand keyboards that you customize. Before my first pair of HOTAs, I used a gamepad with a mouse, and it was all I needed. If you combine the gamepad with any stick or throttle, you'd have more buttons than you needed to keep from removing your headset. It just takes a while to memorize your bindings. That's not to say you can't just use mouse and keyboard, but blindly trying to give your keyboard the reach around, looking for the home keys in order to find the other key you need in the middle of playing, it's a little much. After you get all that settled, you'll feel right at home flying your ship. It'll be the same, except a way better, way more immersive experience. Being inside of your space whips will give you a renewed sense of ownership of your ships and probably keep you engaged for longer. We've got good comparisons for general flight, but what about when you step out of the pilot chair? That's the question that Elite Dangerous failed to answer. As great an experience as Elite Dangerous is in VR, and as cool and a little bit nauseating Aircar is, your VR legs are still bolted to the deck. So there's a few unknowns out there with how it works in Star Citizen, where you're in and out of the pilot seat all the time. Matter of fact, think about when you're starting a new session. You spawn into a hab, laying on your bed, and the first thing you do is get out of bed. So you hit Y to get up, and your body moves, your perspective changes, and your character stands up. So far, so good. Now you walk over to the door to exit the hab. Oh God. What do you mean? Oh, God. All right, some of you will know where I'm going with this, but for everybody else, there's a couple different types of locomotion when you're on foot in VR. There's teleportation, where you point to a spot you want to walk to, click it, and you teleport over to it. Teleportation is easy peasy on the senses, but that's just not going to work for Star Citizen because we can't just have folks teleporting all over the place. I mean, sometimes we do now, but those are desync issues. So we're gonna have to rock what's called continuous locomotion. That's where you push forward or whichever direction and your character moves in that direction just like you do right now. The problem with continuous locomotion is that until you build up a good clean tolerance to VR, it is the most foreign shit to your brain that you instantly start feeling queasy. Because you're moving forward but your body is still. The first time you try it, it feels kind of like being on a skateboard but your surroundings are coming at you instead of you moving forward into your environment. But like I said, you build up a tolerance to that and it becomes natural. This was just my second time playing this basketball game after a gap of a few months, and moving forward and backwards were just fine. What's not so fun is turning while moving. By default, most VR games are set to snap turn, where you flick the right stick in a direction, your head instantly snaps X amount of degrees in that direction. Star Citizen doesn't have snap turning, so I turned it off in VR, and yeah, you do get dizzy turning, and it's not just a little bit. And you gotta suffer through it for at least a handful of play sessions before you're used to it. And then think about how much faster you're moving, ducking, spinning, and aiming in the verse. There's already fast-paced shooters in VR, so it's doable, but those games have built-in features to keep your guts from bubbling 3 minutes in. A notable one is a vignette. That's a black area surrounding your immediate view to kill or shrink down the surrounding area. I don't know exactly why that works, but it works. I don't imagine folks being too enthused about having their view cut off a Star Citizen, but I do hope this is included with the option to turn it down and then completely off. That way you can get used to things, then take the training wheels off at your own pace. Like with the ships, games that are designed 100% for VR have their controls simplified so that everything can be done with VR controllers. And VR controllers are designed to use natural hand movements and therefore don't have a lot of buttons. In the verse, you need to move in 4 different directions, turn 360 degrees, walk, jog, sprint, jump, crouch, go prone, roll over, peek left and right, use handheld guns and gadgets and all their functions, melee weapons, interact with objects, and a bunch of other stuff I'm forgetting. Which means you'll most definitely be using either a controller, gamepad, or mouse and keyboard, which could be an area of disconnect. Having and seeing your body in VR but controlling it with a keyboard. It works with ships and vehicles, but imagine your real body needing to be moved around with a mouse and keyboard. I can't speak from experience on that one, but I think you can do that with a few games like No Man's Sky, so if you already done it, let us know your experience. As Chris Roberts says, the UI is mostly diegetic. Things you interact with are done in a way that your character themselves would normally interact with them, like picking up a weapon and customizing it while it's in your hand, rather than being taken to a separate inventory screen and customizing it there. Assuming mouse and keyboard FPS play, or if you're a weirdo like your boy, mouse and controller play, assuming those won't be too much of a disconnect and that there won't be too much motion sickness to make folks tap out, the rest should translate fairly well. Where things could get tricky though is with performance. The general consensus for VR is that 60 frames a second is the minimum frame rate for your adventure to be passable as far as comfort. Anything below 60 can cause nausea, disorientation, and discomfort like American medicine. Right now with Star Citizen, you might see frame rates as low as 20 to 30 something frames a sec in an area like Orison that doesn't perform very well, all the way up past 140 frames on the moon or in space. That doesn't mean go spend up your money on a rig while we have no idea how it will perform by the time VR is ready to go, but it's worth your consideration that hardware may be a barrier to entry since you'll need something that can crank out enough performance for a steady experience. And you also have to throw the headset into the equation. That's a whole other video, but starting at $399 USD, the Quest 2 is by far the most widely adopted and one of the most affordable headsets you can get, but its graphical performance is not really what you're looking for when it comes to Star Citizen. To get those crisp visuals you expect, you might need to spend the cost of an $890 jump. Overall, the prospect of Star Citizen in VR sounds like it'll be a beautiful thing that lets you live your best space life on a whole new level, but CIG definitely has their work cut out for them in terms of creating an immersive experience that works with non-VR controls, doing their best to keep you from living in a barf bag paradise, and optimizing the game enough to perform above the minimum VR requirements. However it goes, I'll be there with the coverage. Till then, check out this video for no reason. Fly Dirty Citizen.
What?
Streamers can get more from their streams on Kick by keeping 95% of their earnings. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? It's an uncanny sensation, don't you think? That eerie prickling in the back of your neck, the
seems to grow stronger no matter how hard you try to shake it off. Despite the rational knowledge that you are alone, something within, some raw, instinctual voice tells you that you aren't. Minecraft is a game that can be quite lonely. We are so alone when exploring the infinite world in single player. But what if that solitude was shattered by that same sense, that feeling of being watched? What would you do? Recently, I stumbled upon a YouTube channel named Mindwatch Recordings that has stirred these same feelings within me. The first video is titled Found a Website. An open notepad session gives us some information. I found this Mindwatch website. It has many Minecraft cameras I can watch. I chose this one because it looks interesting and no one is there yet. Maybe there will be something. Sure enough, the website indicates that the camera is live, revealing a cave somewhere. There are chests, a crafting table, and a bed out in the distance. After a few moments, we hear the sound of a door opening, and then a player appears. But that's it. The video ends quickly. However, the subsequent video titled Another Look lets us see just a bit more. It opens with the home page of Mindwatch. You've arrived at Mindwatch, where you can watch Minecraft cameras from all over the Minecraft globe. No registration needed. Currently we have over 4,000 cameras live at the same time. Examining the update section, it is revealed that the website was launched just over a week prior to the upload of this video. Since then, there have been several updates, the latest coinciding with this video's upload date. The user selects the guide link, which gives us some more information. Click on the camera's hyperlink. You can see a list of cameras. It is easy to watch them. Just click on their specific button or image. The buttons also have the camera ID under them, which is sometimes useful. For example, going back to the camera later. Remember, if you cannot or do not want to pick, just click on the random camera hyperlink. Clicking on the camera's link displays the list of active cameras. The person recording mentions that they've lost the link to the old camera, so they select random camera, ID 818. As the video feed loads, we catch a player busy setting up a minecart system. There are a few signs scattered about, but they're indecipherable due to the low resolution. An unnerving detail presents itself beneath the feed, a chat section stating, "Player is not in multiplayer." Is this camera showing a view into a single-player world? That shouldn't be possible, right? As the stream continues, the player starts moving left to right in an odd manner, and the person recording comments that they're doing weird actions, as if the player knows they're being watched. They switch to a new tab and type Mindwatch. Do players know they are being watched? If we return to the page with all of the streams, we can see that some of them are connected to public servers. ID 96 corresponds to the Hypixel spawn. ID 147 is Mineplex. 496 is a server called Purple Prison, and 908 is from Build the Earth. 1335 is from a server called HeroBrine.org. Then there are a couple of IDs corresponding to a server called Minecraft Online. The origin of the last few feeds is unknown. That same day, another video was released entitled Multiplayer Conversation. The camera feed is very dark, but for the first time we see players in the chat. Shrug XXL and Deluxe Wish are in the midst of a mundane conversation about mining for iron. Sure enough, we hear blocks breaking in the background. Approximately 30 seconds into the feed, the blocks in front of the camera are mined, revealing Shrug XXL's dark figure. They react with shock in the chat. What is this? Camera? Deluxe Wish heads over and is equally appalled, saying that they're taking the camera down. This bizarre encounter tells us some important information about the nature of Mindwatch. First, the live streams are connected to camera blocks that are visible within the Minecraft world. This is how Shrug XXL was able to know that they were being watched. We also learn that sometimes these blocks are added without the knowledge of players, as evidenced by their shock reaction. Yet, these two discoveries seem paradoxical. If a stream requires an in-game camera, how would it be possible for the player to be unaware of such a camera? On a multiplayer server, it could have been placed by someone else. But what about in single-player mode? As it turns out, the next video, My House, provides an example of this exact situation. We are back with another desktop recording. This time, there's a Minecraft window where we watch a player chop a tree. When they type in chat in the game, it is revealed that their name is 8ball Luck. 8ball wants to look at new random Mindwatch cameras. On the website, 8ball fixates upon ID 5284. Apparently, this is their house. 8ball opens the feed and then returns to Minecraft, running towards the camera location. When they get there, they look up to where the camera should be, but nothing is there. On the website, the stream has gone dead. This sequence appears to confirm some sort of connection between live streams on the website and cameras in-game.
Okay, this is gonna be kind of funny because I'm doing this for Brackeys GameJam and then I watch Brackeys video.
In this video, we'll use Shader Graph to create a cool looking force field. At the end, you should have
Inception.
something that looks
Thanks,
like
Brackeys.
this. I'm sure Winston would be proud. Notice how the effect takes advantage of a new node called Scene Depth to show where it intersects with other objects. The
Depth.
same effect can easily be applied to create
Done
other
this
cool
before.
effects like foam in water or a sci-fi scanner. But before we get started, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with more than 27,000 quality classes on game development, tech, and more. If, for example, you don't have any prior experience in Unity but really want to make your game idea come to life, this course teaches you the basics of Unity without having to write any code. At the end of the course, you will even have created 2 gaming classics, Breakout and Doodle Jump. Skillshare is the perfect platform to keep learning and thriving, and a Skillshare membership gives you unlimited access to all classes for less than $10 a month. Join more than 7 million creators by simply clicking the link in the description, and the first 500 people will receive their first 2 months for free. Also, special thanks to Infinity PBR for his support on Patreon, and with that, let's get shading. So first of all, you want to make sure that you're using Unity 2019.1 or later, and Shader Graph now works with both the lightweight and the HD render pipeline, but no matter which one you're using, you should go to Window, select the package to a subtract node, and let's go from our alpha of a split into that.
Okay. I sort of done this already. What do you want, Brackeys?
Subtract node. And that should in fact already be working.
Right. Splitting the alpha, taking it to the subtract node.
In theory, going up and space it and go into Unity.
Into emission. Get some stuff here. This here. Click this.
Voila! We can see kind of what's going on here. We have this and measuring better there, and we can do that. We create out of it, and to use the and take the add it, we put it back in and subtract it from our scene depth. And now, if we save that and go back into Unity, we can see that we can start to control this gradient that happens at the intersections. You can see that simply by adjusting the offset, we can make that more or less apparent. Pretty cool. But of course, we don't want to add this to the emission of our PBR master node. Instead, we wanted to change the alpha of our material. So let's remove this from the emission. Let's plug it into the alpha instead. And if we just save that and have a look at what's going on, it's going to look really, really weird. And the reason for this is that currently this value isn't clamped to go between 0 and 1, which is what the alpha expects. Whenever we go below 0 on the alpha or above 1, things start to get wacky. So what we want to do is, first of all, we want to reverse this, because the alpha works in such a way that white values are non-transparent and black values are transparent. And currently we have black values near the edges, which means that we should probably reverse what we have going on here. So to do that, we simply plug it through a 1- node, and that is basically going to do exactly what it says here. It's going to multiply everything with -1, which of course is going to reverse it. And then, in order to clamp the value between 0 and 1, we can output this into a smooth step node. We're going to take the ln input here, and it's going to go between
See, this is where I'll do a smooth step node, that's fine with me. We want to be in, and we're going to
you can see 0 or up to create kind of a nice smooth gradient. So let's output this directly into our alpha, and I'm also just going to collapse this and make some room here. And if we now save this asset, we should see, and it's not very visible right now, but we should see that we have this outline near the intersections of our material. Really, really cool. And the reason why these aren't very clear at the moment is because, well, we're just using the default albedo of our PBR master, and we haven't applied any emission. And I think if there's anything that deserves emission, it's a force field. So let's fix this right now. In fact, let's create a property in our blackboards. Let's hit plus. Let's select color. And this is going to be the emission. Make this a bit prettier. I'm going to go into my and let's save that asset. Close the emission.
Did you make a gradient?
No. To something like 2.6. Let's drag it in to create control the emit. And now you can see kind of what an effect.
Okay. That I'm gonna make the default like. Oh, did I?
Effect.
No.
This effect.
Oh, I wanted to look at the material for that. Okay, it's here now, and the edge.
And create a node out of it.
Your offset is 0.5. What? Three positions split, and you subtract it by this here. Yeah, and you subtract by seam depth with I1 minus, then you smooth step. Cool.
And
So
let's
his
drag
just looks better
through
than mine.
the edit we're starting to get. And in fact, why don't we go ahead and make it just a tiny bit more intense? There, bring the intersections to the of. Let's set the power to something like 5.
Knew
and
it.
We should probably make this adjustable from within the editor. So let's like this. We'll use shader graph to create a cool looking actions. In fact, there are other cool effects like. Really easy. Here we want to add the glowing outline to the Fresnel. So that's exactly what we're going to be using here. Let's add it up, and there we go. And all we're
Okay. That's that color. We can do a float of no color. We'll go here. This goes here.
we're going action. And for our Fresnel, let's go ahead and plug this into an add node, which be ready to just node behind here. And as you can see in our preview, the Fresnel effect immediately.
Should be annoying.
Yes.
What? Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't think that's exactly what I was hoping for.
Immediately shows up, and if we save this asset,
right? What the fuck? It's not me, right? Like, do vanilla.
and go back, preview the Fresnel effect.
What the fucking what? Why does mine look like that? It looks weird. That's even worse. Okay, in my opinion, that's better. Although I kind of hate. Ew. Can we smooth stuff not like that? Yeah. Didn't change anything. Mr. Brackeys, sir, it's not working. The thing, I swear. Look, compare. We got this. Look at that tree. Look at my tree. I've been betrayed. Or I'm just a dumbass, but I mean, offset is called edge in this one. It's fine. Oh, is that supposed to be a vector? Am I? See, I skipped ahead. Okay, it wasn't Mr. Brackeys' fault. It was my fault. I am admittedly
let's
a
go up here
dumbass.
and let's create a vector 1.
Wait, no,
Let's
that's a
call it
float.
plus.
Never mind. I'm not a dumbass. Mr. Brackeys, sir, I'm upset. The fuck? Oh, because it's PBR, so it does that whole... What about this alpha clip thing? Is that gonna be helpful? No. It doesn't work. Oh, wait, I can't. How's that? That is... not what I need. That's not what I need either. Can we have a happy medium? No. Impossible. Not allowed. Okay. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Wow, it's crazy. The Fresnel effect is shown in the alpha. Wow. Does that fix? That fixes nothing. If I just did it. That. Okay. Back to 0.5. If I... Well, this one does the thing, right? Yeah, it does that. So then if I just do this plus the power of Fresnel? Do I need to do it in a specific way? Is it the other way? The power of Fresnel. Because this is black. I don't know why it's inverting. What do you have to say, Mr. Brackeys?
Let's select color, change it, define, drag, starting to get here. And so this fact, which is adding the intersections. The next part is actually fairly easy. Here we want to add the glowing outline.
What if hypothetically this was tangent space? No? Okay. This sucks because he's not making more videos and they changed the things, so now I gotta like play around with this and hope. I feel like what if I oh that
Alina, can I show you something?
oh my goodness.
I've been trying to fix something for like an hour.
I don't know why that's doing that, and I don't know why this is doing that. So
Scott, do you want to see what thing was causing me 2 hours of trying to fix?
yeah, sure.
You have to come over here.
I have to.
Yeah.
I have to get out.
You gotta just see this.
That's so hard, though. Okay, go. You committed to the bit. You know what? I'm hungry. Actually, that's yeah, no. I was gonna say your mom gave, but I decided to like not.
I'm glad you were able to figure it out, and I'm sorry it was stupid. It took way too long. Talk to you.
hates me. I don't understand why. Says it would add
to the rest of our model. And if you watch the videos for a while, you might know that I'm a big fan of Fresnel. So that
Or am I wrong?
A setting for dragon. So that should pretty much be ready to just take the output. See in our preview,
with the price of just about everything inflating
the Fresnel effect immediately shows up, and if we save the dragon in and apply it to our sphere. And now it's almost time to quality reset to true. That's because we're going to be using the scene depth node.
Oh, is that why? Oh, game dev at its finest. Depth texture. And this is a depth texture as well. And wow, crazy concept. This is also depth texture. We're gonna save that. And we're gonna try this again. I typed out ass. God damn it, I typed out ass. That was just dumb as all hell. Dev stuff, hey games. Oh man, I'm so excited to see the review. Just excited to see people play it. Like, I've been able to see the numbers, like, of people playing it, but I haven't actually seen that much video of people playing the game, so excited to see what you think.
Okay, it uploaded. Version?
Okay, look, Brackeys does not. Brackeys isn't saving me here. This is for his jam. It's supposed to be saving me. It's not working.
Texture. Otherwise, that node is just going to give us a gray output. And now we're ready to jump into shader graph. So let's double click on our force field shader, and it's going to open up in a separate window. I'm just going to full screen this, and at this point,
he's also doing it on like an old version of Unity.
For his support on Patreon,
so
and with that, one
it's
pipe,
like different.
In this case, I'm using know how to
he's
set up
using
description.
also different render pipeline.
Up, and I'm just going to put it next to that. It's or gonna select PPR graph.
Yeah, look, I don't even have this option to make sure that I do the right thing. Look, create shader. It's just like not here. I just don't get a PBR graph. This is fun, having fun here. So like I know that. I'm gonna mess with this a bit. Let's see, blending. He doesn't like specify any of these. No. Okay, maybe I'll get to the texture and it'll work better, or maybe I'll just do the thing that I was gonna do before, where I was gonna have two spheres. But yeah, because I was gonna just have like one sphere with the thing that is actually freaking working, which is this shader. If I delete this, put this color in. This is actually working and looks pretty cool. Let me bring this out. Not what I wanted to do. Oh, I should just put it down and let me do the thing. It looks pretty cool if I actually do a scan. Like, that's pretty good. But the issue is that I can't see it if I'm not near a mesh. So I might just need to do a second I'm actually really excited for this game. Because what should happen is that I scan, see where the nodes are, okay, scan, there we go. See, like, I have to intentionally go really close to the ground. I don't want to do that, so let's try that. I'm going to do what I was doing before, so create this. Actually, wait, I'm going to fully watch the Brackeys video.
Forest field, and we know
because he's going to
so
put a
I'm gonna
texture
hit plus
in here.
here and create a texture 2D property. I've basically just, there we go, it's a hexagon grid. There's not kind of scene. Of course, whenever we do is basically multiply that. Let's move them over. Create 8 per time, speeds this up to, and with that in our preview here, you can see that along with some kind of vector, see that there's a timer, the offset on the transition to section. So the first thing that we're going in Unity for light key, that. Notice how I'm making sure that this object is intersecting with other objects so that we can see this part of the shader working as well. And now we're ready to create our shape, shader material, then gonna automatically create a material with this shader selected. I'm just gonna call this material force field as well. Let's then take this material, drag it in, and apply it to our sphere. And now it's almost graph, but first we need to go and find our lightweight render pipeline object right here. Weight temp texture set to requires 8. So let's double this and add into throwing effect wherever this one is just a general the parts that scrolling pattern, which is going to need is to access our scene depth. So to do this, we're going to.
So I'm gonna hope that I just missed a
node, and this is going to get the
thing
camera
here.
step buffer, and we can choose how it's going to sample it. We are going to choose I, which means that it's going to be converted to I-based units.
Pretty sure
Why
that
this
that's
is
what I
important
have.
is a bit difficult to explain. For now, just go with me. We are also going to access the screen position. So let's go ahead and create a screen position node. And here we're going to set the mode to raw. And basically what screen position does is it accesses the mesh vertex screen position. And why is this useful? Well, it's useful because we can know how far away a vertex is and then compare that to our scene depth buffer. And in fact, if we subtract this vertex distance from our scene depth, we're going to get a cool intersection effect. So to actually do this in practice, we want to split up our screen position. So we'll input it into a split node. And we only want to use the very last component here, so the alpha value. And we're going to simply take that and subtract it from a scene depth. So let's go from scene depth into a subtract node. And let's go from our alpha of a split into that subtract node. And that should in fact already be working in theory. So what we can do now is take this entire thing and let's plug it into the emission of our PBR master node. This is just temporary, but it should allow us to see kind of what's going on. I'm also going to go to our PBR master node and change the surface type to transparent because we're going to be working with transparency. And now if we save this asset and go into Unity, voila, we can see kind of what's going on here. We have this fading gradient wherever this object intersects with the wall. Now it looks a bit weird from the other side here currently, but we can see kind of the same thing happening. And the main reason why this is currently looking weird is because our sphere is also casting shadows. And we really don't want that for this effect. So let's select our sphere, let's go to the mesh renderer and set cast shadows to off. And right away you can see that looks a lot better. The gradient isn't as clear here because the light is hitting it from the front, but it is still there. So the next thing that we want to do is allow ourselves to kind of control this gradient. And we can do it.
I'm gonna turn the processing off. Ooh, god, okay. Let's see that. Back and watch.
Renderer and set cast shadows to off. And right away you can see that looks a lot better. The gradient isn't as clear here because the light is hitting it from the front, but it is still there. So the next thing that we want to do is allow ourselves to kind of control this gradient. And we can do that really easily by simply offsetting our screen position. So to do that, let's go up here and let's create a vector 1. Let's call it offset. And let's drag it in to create a node out of it. And to use this offset, we can simply remove this connection from a split node to a subtract node, and instead put it into a separate subtract node, and we'll simply subtract offset there. And I'm just going to default this to a value of, say, 0.6. We can then take the output of this subtract node and put it into this one. So we've just added a tiny step here where we subtract a value from our screen position, and then we put it back in and subtract it from our scene depth. And now if we save that and go back into Unity, we can see that we can start to control this gradient that happens at the intersections. You can see that simply by adjusting the offset, we can make that more or less.
Get that. Is there no way for you to get that and like send it to Google to Robbie so you don't have to take forever to fucking do it? Then maybe you just write what it is on it. Sure. Right? Like you model an object. If you model an object first, but I think that's the easiest thing, so you don't have to spend hours with oh, this person did instead of this or I wrote this. Yeah.
Let me see if I can just pull some objects out.
You can send that to people who are making materials stuff. Yeah, and that might make it easier.
Okay, I'm going to... Can I reset this? I want to just reset the entire graph to default so I can start over. Try this again. Universal lit. Transparent. Rendering both faces. Depth data is auto. I'm gonna look at the fucking... Wait, shader graph. It's about a vertex. Thank you. Oh. Okay. So now, let me see. I go to scan sphere and I look at the, not the material, this scan shader, offset. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, let's try this again. Maybe I just was doing some weird shit. What the fuck? What is happening? See? Not just me. Oh. Why is the sphere all messed up? Oh, wait. No, it isn't. It's just like... I'm confused. Is it because of the color? It's just like the alpha isn't actually... What the fuck is happening? Oh, well, what? Okay. What if I just turn alpha clipping off? And we have this again. But... Oh, he did mention something about receiving shadows. Now that's weird again. Although I do think that's doing the thing that I kind of wanted to do. Okay, we're gonna continue with...
Appearance. Pretty cool. But of course, we don't want to add this to the emission of our PBR master node. Instead, we wanted to change the alpha of our material. So let's remove this from the emission. Let's plug it into the alpha instead. And if we just say that and have a look at what's going on, it's going to look really, really weird. And the reason for this is that currently this value isn't clamped to go between 0 and 1, which is what the alpha expects. Whenever we go below 0 on the alpha or above 1, things start to get wacky. So what we want to do is, first of all, we want to reverse this, because the alpha works in such a way that white values are non-transparent and black values are transparent. And currently we have black values near the edges, which means that we should probably reverse what we have going on here. So to do that, we simply plug it through a 1- node, and that is basically going to do exactly what it says here. It's going to multiply everything with -1, which of course is going to reverse it. And then, in order to clamp the value between 0 and 1, we can output this into a smooth step node. We're going to take the ln input here, and it's going to go between, as you can see, 0 and 1. And this is both going to clamp the value to make sure it doesn't go under 0 or above 1, but it's also going to use a smooth Hermite interpolation to create kind of a nice smooth gradient. So let's output this directly into our alpha, and I'm also just going to collapse this and make some room here. And if we now save this asset, we should see, and it's not very visible right now, but we should see that we have this outline near the intersections of our material. Really, really cool. And the reason...
Where are they? Dog, what the fuck? Well, now I just broke it all. Okay. Let me go find the shader. Where did I put it? In here, we got player, we got the scan shader graph. We are changing those. What the? What the hell was I thinking earlier? Let's do this. Do this. This is the shader. Okay. Let's try this again. What? Yes. 1 minus. We have our clamp between 0 and 1. We go here. We multiply it by the clamp. What's the clamp? It's not going to show us. Is that not?
The stream feed and camera were both removed at the same time, though we didn't see the camera itself. From the way 8-Ball talks, we know that they didn't place the camera in the first place. Somehow, both the camera's addition and removal occurred without 8-Ball's knowledge. It was about this time that a group of Discord users became aware of Mindwatch, launching their own independent investigation into the mystery. They discovered that one of the stream IDs corresponded to a server known as Minecraft Online. A player named 2B2T Legends was tracking down the camera location when they crossed paths with a user named YourMelee, who congratulated them on finding a broadcast. The investigators realized that another Discord user had also encountered YourMelee while on a similar mission. Given their precise knowledge of ID locations, it appeared that YourMelee had some understanding of the internal workings of Mindwatch. They placed signs throughout the Minecraft Online world, leading Discord users to discover additional ID locations. One of these signs led to a private server known in the community as Frames, with the ID of 4096. Right on cue, the following day saw a fresh video on the channel titled Active Server Camera Hunt. 8-Ball selects ID 4096, and as expected, the live feed displays the distinctive landscape of the Frame server. On sporadic occasions, users would join frames and reveal links to files. Among these were several MP4 recordings of various Mindwatch streams. Of particular interest was a text file saying that Mindwatch is owned by a team who wishes to remain anonymous. Beyond that, these files contained little new information. A 4-month period of silence ensued. It ended in October 2022 with the release of a video titled Everything is New. When 8Ball navigates to the Mindwatch page, we see that there have been several updates to the site. 8Ball selects a link called How the ID System Works. The page says that ID numbers are associated with each Mindwatch camera. As it turns out, IDs are recycled, with the oldest inactive ID reassigned to a fresh camera. This is designed to limit the amount of dead cameras during a random sort. Next, there's a page dedicated to explaining the mechanics of the chat. Each viewer gets assigned a random name, sometimes using the Watcher format and other times a random sequence of characters. The Watcher format provides real-time information regarding the number of watchers of a specific camera, though for reasons unknown, the format has been temporarily disabled. Next, 8Ball ventures to the camera section, where they encounter many new IDs. 8Ball selects ID 3145, where we see a zombie horde attacking a group of villagers in a cave. They return to choose the random filter, opening several cameras in new tabs. Camera number 965 shows a stream of a player dancing to music in their room. They switch the disc and continue dancing. After a few seconds, however, the disc audio cuts out. Against the eerie silence, the player dances on. Without warning, the camera freezes altogether. On the Add a Camera section of the site, 8Ball finds a detailed tutorial explaining the process of embedding a camera in a game. 8Ball notes that the snooper needs to be activated. The snooper is a Minecraft feature that sends telemetry data to Mojang about the game. 8Ball says they'll try it later. The Mindwatch channel was silent for another month, until a video called Unexplainable Stuff was uploaded. The live feed picks up at the same location as the last, though the room has been slightly modified during the break. The player opens a chest and puts a disc into the jukebox, though they remove it after a few seconds. And then, they're gone. Let's watch what happens next.
Oh, I see. So are you saying if I... Yeah, okay. I feel like I've watched this video before. What the hell is happening?
There's a lot to unpack here. We are presented with a sudden... We note that this perspective is from the same world. Not only does the ID remain the same, but we can see that the player is just outside the disco room. There's another player looking through the window, staring back. Turning to face the wall, we see some signs. Rainy days never say goodbye. To desire when we are together. Rainy days growing in your eyes. Tell me where's my way. It turns out that these poetic lines are actually lyrics from a song called I Like Chopin by Gazebo, released in 1983. The only obvious connection is that this track is a disco track, which would seem to fit with the dance room. The journey continues when the player enters a dark hallway. It resembles a prison, with iron doors and additional players within the cells. Each cell has a sign, although none are legible due to the quality. Upon opening one final door, we catch sight of another figure before the scene abruptly cuts back to the initial shot. Then, a red message flashes ominously. Throughout the video, there are occasional beeping sounds. Each beep corresponds to a skip forward in time, as indicated by the on-screen stopwatch. The reason for this remains a mystery. Once the camera returns to normal, 8Ball clicks a link to a post titled, Why is Mindwatch constantly going offline? It appears that Mindwatch recently migrated to new servers in an attempt to fix a bug, but to no avail. Could this bug somehow be related to the anomalies we've been witnessing? These strange occurrences prove to be just as confusing for 8Ball.
why these aren't very clear at the moment, it's because let's create a node out of it, and let's drag my post-process.
Just take this and go through a mission like this. That's what you're saying? Oh. Okay. So now if I go back here and I just say front, what does that look like? Okay, and I just say back. What does that look like? Okay, what if I... shit. If I just okay.
They click on the guestbook page and start typing.
Doesn't it feel a bit weird, guys? Some cameras are straight up weird.
Out of all the videos we've seen, this one is probably the most confusing. What is this strange prison place? Why is time skipping? Who is the player?
What are you laughing at?
For now, the answers remain elusive. Up to this point, the only people known to be investigating Mindwatch are 8ball and the Discord community from earlier. However, information about Mindwatch surfaced elsewhere in the form of a Reddit post. A user named Equipmental uploaded an intriguing image.
Mindwatch admin login found by my friend.
According to a comment, their friend entered admin as the username alongside a password. This triggers an eerie siren-like sound. Let's take a listen. The audio begins with a few beeps followed by a pitch that warbles and changes as time goes on. After about 20 seconds, indistinct voices enter, saying words that are difficult to understand. The audio concludes with a final tone. The snippet produces more questions than answers. What exactly does this have to do with Mindwatch? Why did it come from the supposed administrator panel? Equipmental returned to Reddit 9 days later with a post called Mindwatch's Dimensions. There are 4 sections listed: Mindhell, Admin, CDN, and Empty. Each of these corresponds to a certain section of the website. Mine held a dimension that makes everything red, and it can be accessed by swearing constantly. The admin panel dimension is what we saw in the previous post. The CDN dimension can be accessed by going to cdn.mindwatch.net. Someone named Jazz District apparently discovered a password as well. A CDN is a content delivery network which helps deliver content such as images and video to the end user. However, it doesn't appear as though Equipmental was able to access any data. The final dimension is called empty, which occurs when you send invalid data to the web console. Then there's another period of silence. After nearly 3 months, a video called Conversation surfaced. It opens with a short glimpse of a discussion between a user named Frivolman and a watcher. They discuss what appears to be a strange character. Perhaps it was only a hallucination. The video abruptly cuts forward about 50 minutes. A previously written note says that 8Ball was thinking about recording a conversation in a camera, hoping that the people knew something that he doesn't. 8Ball has apparently read the Reddit post and navigates to mindwatch.net/administrator2, finding the same login page. 8Ball then says that new credentials were found in a database leak. They enter Quartzant as the username and a 17-character password, then press the T button 3 times. Suddenly, we hear another warbly sound, similar to Equipmental's recording. The oddities would soon reach a new apex just 2 days later, when 8Ball woke up to something on the Mindwatch website. Before we watch it, let's take a look at the description.
I should never AFK on this site again. I swear every time I go do something else and leave this on for some time, many strange things begin to happen. This time I was sleeping, and I totally forgot I was doing that. It literally jump scared me.
And add in some bloom, and that is really going to help sell this effect. In fact, why don't we go ahead and make it just a tiny bit more intense. There we go. In 2 sections. The next part is actually fairly easy. Here we want to add the glowing outline to the rest of our model. Exactly what 5, and we should probably make this adjustable from within the edit. Call it in, and so let's take this entire thing here, remove this connection, and for our Fresnel, let's go ahead and plug this into an add node. Let's also take the output of a smooth step and plug that in, and now we should pretty
There we go.
pretty much be ready to just take the output of all this and wire it into the alpha. Oops, there's a node behind here.
Okay, so yeah, take all this, put it in
And
the
as you can see
alpha.
in our preview, the Fresnel effect immediately
God damn it. Whoa. So I do need to... okay. The people in the comments said to set it to 0. So that's what I did. So like okay. Maybe it's because there's no lighting. Can I make it so that it's not affected by light? What about just fucking... What the fuck is this thing? Okay, this is not... Oh, Jesus. What the fuck is happening? Oh my god. Okay. Damn it. I don't like this.
Immediately shows up,
We're
and
gonna
if we save this
pretend
asset,
like
really
that
cool,
that's
pretty much.
happening.
And you can type the text prop, put the texture that I quick. It's basically just that strat where we want to output this into a sample texture node. Do that, let's take this entire, move them over, this texture, so we'll take the output of the texture here, put it into a multiply node, together with our outline, and let's take the result of that and plug it into our alpha. And as you can see right away...
Okay. I'm gonna do this. plus multiply here. Y goes here. This goes into alpha. These are over here. Wait, what the hell? Also, that's really cool. Am I... What the fuck? Oh yeah, because there's no input anyways.
Was outside my body. I forgot to turn the speakers off. Me. This site. Whoever is doing this, do they know about me? I'm tired of this. Besides that, I think Quartzant is connected. Whatever that corporation is, or company, or an individual. I don't care anymore. After this incident, I think I should just leave my friends to investigate all this themselves.
If we slow the video down, we can read the repeated text, all from some...
Who's gonna need more Tide? Everyone. Now there's 85% more Tide in every power pod.
What's up guys, welcome back to Gabriel again, bro. Install it and shade the graph. So we can have an empty the similar vertices. Both the hexagons and great create a pixel layout. You can create to a red type is put in the
That is not what I want.
inspector. You will note the burst of only one particle and you get some is black, so it fixes graph if you want time. Oh, and use a color if an object your center page.
I don't even know what the hell that was. I'm a little scared. No, what I want is a scan. I've done this before, but it's not as much as like, ooh.
Hace poco tiempo me preguntaba cómo crear un efecto de videojuegos. Sugiero que te des una vuelta por el canal, único que utilizaremos para este. Observa, el eje X en view de la cámara es equivalente a 0, por lo que a la derecha. Si en esta ocasión conectamos el eje Y al canal, la razón es muy de 2 dimensiones. Creamos un nodo I de nuestra estimación de en Z de lo que está viendo nuestra cámara y se genera en todas las intersecciones de la misma, simplemente multiplicando el conectamos el resultado y guardamos. Esto nos dará mayor control sobre nuestro shader y nos evitará problemas futuros si es que algún número se llegara a salir de los rangos permitidos por Unity. Conectamos el resultado.
Wait a second. So he's doing it different. He did split. When was this? 1 year ago. Okay, I'm following this, homie. Let's try this again. I think I've got to watch this guy's videos before. Let me do this. Just disconnect. I know how to do all that. Okay, we're gonna do this over again. What he did was position. Split. Take not that, but the B of it. Multiply from A by 1. Then take that and subtract from B. Take C and depth. Yeah. There you go. Then from there we multiply by the. Say that's offset. Right, he says range. I'm gonna say offset. Goes here. Then saturate. Oh, he put it into base color.
Y guardamos. Ahora, con nuestra nueva variable de rango, podemos controlar la magnitud de nuestra intersección a voluntad, pero se llegará a salir de los rangos permitidos por Unity.
Wait, yeah, these are all there.
Desde el inspector. el rango de nuestra operación es que si guardamos esto y esfera. Como podemos la posición en X de lo que la cámara está viendo en pantalla, por lo que, si colocamos la esfera en medio de la pantalla, esta se dividirá en por lo que, negro sobrando en una simulación 3D, que el punto medio de los valores positivos y a la izquierda negativos. Esta lógica, si movemos nuestra esfera por la pantalla al blanco absoluto y lo conectamos el eje Y al canal de color, guardamos y volvemos el eje verde, conectamos el eje Z. Si lo hacemos y guardamos nuestro shader, notaremos que nada se pinta de color blanco, todo es negro absoluto, y la razón es muy sencilla, el eje Z es la profundidad de la escena. Pero nuestra cámara únicamente proyecta una imagen de 2 dimensiones. Para que esto funcione, tenemos que acceder a la información de profundidad de nuestra cámara que se conoce como depth. Creamos un nodo sin depth en modo eye. Esta opción nos dará acceso a la información de profundidad que ve nuestra cámara en escena, específicamente en el eje Z. El modo eye es solo otra manera de decir de nuestra escena a través de la cámara. Es necesario decirle a nuestra cámara que permita la lectura de profundidad, por lo que marcaremos esta casilla de Depth Texture. Profundidad de nuestra escena, vamos a crear una operación de resta. Creamos un nodo subtract y restamos de los valores de profundidad el valor inverso en Z de lo que está viendo nuestra cámara en view position. Para esto, multiplicaremos por -1 nuestro eje Z y se lo restamos a nuestro nodo de profundidad. Si guardamos esto y volvemos a escena, notaremos que nuestra esfera es blanca con un borde negro que se genera en todas las intersecciones de la misma. Este es el resultado de nuestra operación.
Oh. Well, no fucking shit.
Podemos controlar el rango de nuestra intersección, simple flotante, al cual desde el inspector.
Is it the texture? Cause like whoa. I did it on accident. Woo! What? Wait, what? What did I do? The fuck happened? Wait. Whoa, okay. I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did at all. Oh, great. Okay. So you're telling me that this offset. Okay. Uh-huh. If I put that there, does that fuck up? No. That makes more sense, actually. Okay. So the emission just doesn't like me, because if I do it, like, really fucking... Oh. Well, duh. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Okay. So then from here, I take my Fresnel, like I had, do our add. There we go. Okay, so it just looked weird because of the color. What if I just don't have color? Well, that's dumb. I won't color. Okay. So, what? Okay, I'm gonna go back to Brackeys.
This is not your typical ad for makeup or auto insurance.
Don't want that for this effect. So let's select our sphere. Let's go to the mesh renderer and set cast shadows to off. And right away you can see that looks a lot better. The gradient isn't as clear here because the light is hitting it from the front going on. I'm also going to go to our PBR master node and change the surface type to transparent because we're going to be working with transparency. And now if we save this asset and go into Unity, voila! We can see kind of what's going on here. We have this fading gradient wherever this object intersects with the wall. Now it looks a bit weird from the other side here currently, but we can see kind of the same thing happening. And the main reason why this is currently looking weird is because our sphere is also casting shadows.
Sky,
and
I'm
we really
assuming
don't
this
want
one's
that for
yours.
this.
Oh!
From the microwave?
Yeah, that is mine. Thank you.
Effect. So let's select our sphere. Let's go to the mesh renderer and set cast shadows to off. And right away you can see that looks a lot better. The gradient isn't as clear here because the light is hitting it from the front, but it is still there. So the next thing that we want to do is allow ourselves to kind of control this gradient. And we can do that really easily by simply offsetting our screen position. So to do that, let's go up here and let's create a vector 1. Let's call it offset. And let's drag it in to create a node out of it. And to use this offset, we can simply remove this connection from a split node to a subtract node. And take the output of this subtract here where we subtract a value from our screen position. And then we put it back in ends at the intersections. You can see that simply by adjusting the offset,
so right? What the fuck? What is that even? Delete. Just, oh my god, it does nothing. Okay.
we can make that more or less apparent. Pretty cool. But of course, we don't want to add this to the emission of our PBR master node. Instead, we wanted to change the alpha of our material. So let's remove this from the emission. Let's plug it into the alpha instead. And if we just save that and have a look at what's going on, it's going to look really, really weird. And the reason for this is that currently this value isn't clamped to go between 0 and 1, which is what the alpha expects. Whenever we go below 0 on the alpha or above 1, things start to get wacky. So what we want to do is, first of all, we want to reverse this, because the alpha works in such a way that white values are non-transparent and black values are transparent. And currently we have black values near the edges, which means that we should probably reverse what we have going on here. So to do that, we simply plug it through a 1- node, and that is basically going to do exactly what it says here. It's going to multiply everything with -1, which of course is going to reverse it. And then, in order to clamp the value between 0 and 1, we can output this into a smooth step node. We're going to take the ln input here, and it's going to go between, as you can see, 0 and 1. And this is both going to clamp the value to make sure it doesn't go under 0 or above 1, but it's also going to use a smooth Hermite interpolation to create kind of a... And this is going to be the emission. There we go. Post-processing profile, and add in some bloom, and that is really going to help sell this effect. In fact, why don't we keep the cost of our model? And if you watch the videos for a while, you might know that I'm a big fan of Fresnel. So that's exactly what we're going to be using here. Let's add in a Fresnel effect. Let's set the power to something like 5, and we should probably make this adjustable from 1. Let's just call it Fresnel and hook that up. Tiny thing here, remove this connection. And for our Fresnel, let's go ahead and plug this into an add node. Let's also take the output of a smooth step and plug that in. And now we should pretty much be ready to just take the output of all this and wire it into the alpha. Oops, there's a node behind here. And as you can see in our preview,
OneMaker.io is an online video maker that helps you to create amazing music visualizers in just a few clicks. OneMaker's library features more than 100 beautifully animated, highly customizable music visualizers for you to play with. Upload your songs and cover art, AI-generated motion poster and artwork. Play with colors, fonts, and just export your video. Get a life.
The Fresnel effect immediately shows up, and if we save this asset and go back into Unity, we can clearly see it working. So that's really, really cool. And I'm actually going to go ahead and bump down the intensity again because that is a bit too much. There we go. That looks really, really cool. So that is the first two parts of the effect, and the final part is also fairly easy. That is adding a scrolling pattern across the force field. To do this, let's open up shader graph. And of course, in order to define it,
so the issue is that those artifacts. What the fuck is that? It's pissing me off. It's just these artifacts from whatever the hell that is. It's just not rendering properly, and it's really annoying. Unless... What are you gonna have me do next?
Use a texture that I found.
My main preview is
So
not.
I'm gonna hit plus here, create a texture 2D property, and let's call this one pattern. As the default texture here, I'm gonna input the texture that I found. I found this really cool looking hexagon grid. And let me just show you this real quick. It's basically just, there we go, it's a hexagon grid. There's not much to it. You can use any kind of grid-like structure, just make sure that it tiles seamlessly. So with this pattern, I'm going to drag that in. And of course, whenever we're working with a texture, we want to output this into a sample texture node, and that is going to display it. And what we want to do is basically multiply this together with the output of our outline. So to do that, let's take this entire thing here. So let's take all these nodes, not include.
Where's the game? Oh. Okay, what does this look like in my... Yeah, see, it still looks fucked up. Right? Like, that's not just me. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a fucking collider on it. Wait a second. Okay. That didn't really change anything. Okay. Cool.
Including that one. Let's move them over. Let's remove this connection here. And let's go ahead and multiply this texture. So we'll take the output of the texture here, put it into a multiply node together with our outline. And let's take the result of that and plug it into our alpha. And as you can see right away, this is going to add the pattern to our outline. Tiling and offset node. And I'm just gonna tile this. In say
Right, so you're just doing... Okay, we're gonna go back. Just take this color, multiply it into there. I do... Let's do this. Going to add to the finale and take the color. Multiply. Take that, throw it into admissions. Ooh. Okay. I'm gonna also just take it back off of rendering both faces. I'm just gonna do front. Yeah, that's the thing. I can't see through it. Oh, because we're not doing the alpha. Okay. So if I do this. From here, goddamn. This from here, take this, do that, add it to the alpha. Oh my. Okay. Wait a second. What? No. Oh, okay, so if it's... Well... Oh, god damn it. Okay.
3 by 3 just to make them smaller. I think that looks much cooler. Let's go into this same pattern. The school as that one, but go. The power shield here, and we can even go ahead and adjust the color to anything that would be a cool effect. Please let us know in the
Cool. Okay, so I was doing it right. I just... Well, that's cool.
comments, but
How'd you do?
I'll just to add one. This is really around that are takes a vector 2 to control this on the x and y individually.
Oh, this goes into here. That's what's supposed to be happening. I like the Noi better. Actually, let's just. Eek. I like that. That's cool. Take this. This adds from now, which is in here. So these two add in there, and this. Oh yeah. Okay, so I can just do two of these. So I'm gonna take this and say one is the actual scan and one is shield. So shield is going to have none of the intersect and it's actually just gonna mostly have the Fresnel. So if I take that, I change this to shield. There, right? So you can perceive that from, I want from both sides. That's fine. Although, actually no, that's not fine. What? in fact why. Oh. Well, that's rather nice. Well, now I'm intrigued. Oh my god. Are you serious? Did I have to actually put the color into the alpha? What if I did this? Are you gonna treat me nice then? Okay, maybe not. I'll do... we go to a mission. I save there. How about now? Ooh. I like, but sadly... Oh yeah, I need something that's tiled. Can I... Wait, what? Whoa. Huh. Okay, so from... I'm actually gonna just use texture. Oh, the tiling's all fucked up. Yeah, no wonder. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Oh my god, why did that take so long, dude? Jesus Christ. I think it's because these UVs are just messed up. That's fine. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. We're fine. Very fine. I think. So this is the thing that all of that, the offset. If it had its own color. Can I have base color? What? Okay, so if I do this. Okay. I don't think that really adds anything. Although this looks cool as all fuck. Okay. This goes into emission. Save that. And go back to here and offset the color. The fucking. What do I multiply this by? Did I go right anymore?